The billionaire's daughter stood in a grease-stained garage at midnight, rain soaking through her silk blouse, watching a single father hold his crying 6-year-old in arms that had built engines but never held a woman like her. "Don't come back here," he whispered, voice breaking. "You'll ruin us both." But his little girl was already reaching for Avery's hand, calling her a name she hadn't earned yet, a name that would destroy 3 lives or save them. If you're watching from anywhere in the world right now, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Stay with me until the very end, because the truth doesn't come out until the last breath of part 5. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Miles Carter wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades and stared through the open bay door of Carter's auto and body, watching the parking lot turn into a shallow lake. Somewhere in the back, the old shop radio crackled through a country song about a man who'd lost everything and learned to live with it. Miles didn't much care for the lyrics, but he hadn't bothered changing the station in 3 years. Changing things required energy he didn't have. It was 9:47 on a Tuesday night in late October, and he should have been home an hour ago. "Daddy?" The voice came from the cluttered office behind him, small and thick with sleep. Miles turned, and there was Chloe, 6 years old and barefoot on the cold concrete, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. Her dark hair stuck up on one side from the couch cushions. She was wearing the oversized Carter's auto hoodie he'd bought her last Christmas, the sleeves swallowing her hands. "Hey, kid!" Miles crossed the shop floor in 3 long strides and scooped her up before her feet got any colder. She weighed almost nothing. Still. He kept waiting for her to get heavy, and she kept refusing. "I told you to stay on the couch." "The rain was loud." "I know." "Are we going home yet?" Miles glanced at the Lincoln Town car sitting in Bay 2, its engine still exposed like something mid-surgery. Mrs. Patterson's car. She'd promised him cash tomorrow if he could have it ready by the morning. She was 81 years old and drove that boat of a vehicle to church, and to her sister's house in Covington and nowhere else, but she needed it running, and Miles needed the $600. 10 more minutes, baby. I promise." Chloe pressed her face into his shoulder. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo from the bathroom in back and the faint oil and metal scent that clung to everything in the shop, including, Miles suspected, his daughter's hair permanently. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" 10 minutes is what you said before." He laughed, short and tired. "You're too smart for your own good." "Miss Denton said it's good to be smart." "Miss Denton's right." He set her down on his rolling stool by his workbench and handed her a juice box from the mini-fridge that had come with the building when he'd signed the lease 4 years ago. The fridge hummed like it was having a bad time about it. Chloe stabbed the straw through the foil with practiced precision. Miles turned back to the Lincoln. He was 32 years old, and he felt 45. His shoulders had started aching when the weather turned, and his lower back hurt if he slept wrong, and the gray at his temples had shown up uninvited sometime around his 30th birthday. He used to think gray was something that happened to other men, older men who'd made different choices. But that was before Sarah. He didn't let himself think about Sarah. Not usually. Not when he was working. He'd trained himself out of it, same way he'd trained himself to wake up at 5:30 without an alarm. Same way he'd trained himself to braid Chloe's hair after watching 47 YouTube tutorials in a single weekend. Sarah was the past. Sarah had left. And Chloe was the whole damn present. He was just about to torque the last bolt when the phone rang. The shop line, not his cell. Nobody called the shop line after 9 except wrong numbers and telemarketers. Miles wiped his hands, walked to the office, and picked it up. Carter's auto. "Oh, thank God." The voice was female, young, breathless. "I'm sorry, I know you're probably closed. The sign said closed, but I tried the number on the door and my car just died. I mean, just like 2 minutes ago, it just stopped. I'm on the side of the road maybe half a mile from your place. I can see your lights. And I swear I've called 3 tow companies, and they all said an hour and a half, and it's pouring, and my phone's at like 9%. Ma'am, slow down." She took a breath. He heard the rain through her end of the line too, tinny and desperate. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm really sorry. Is there any way you could come look at it? I'll pay whatever, please." Miles pinched the bridge of his nose. Chloe was watching him from the workbench, juice box dangling from her lips. "Where are you exactly?" "Route 9, heading south. There's a billboard for a barbecue place, Smoky something?" "Smoky Jim's." Yes, right by there. There's a little pull-off. I know it. Will you come? He looked at Chloe. He looked at the Lincoln. He looked at the rain. And he thought about his mother, 23 years ago, standing on the shoulder of a country road with her hazard lights blinking and a baby in the back seat and not a soul who would stop. Give me 15 minutes, he said. Stay in your car. Door's locked. Don't get out for anybody until I pull up in a black Ford F-150 with Carter's Auto on the door. You got that? Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. What's your name? Avery Quinn. Miles. I'll be there. He hung up and looked at his daughter. Field trip, kid. At night? At night. Can I bring Mr. Whiskers? Mr. Whiskers is welcome in the truck, shout. The truck's wipers were losing the fight. Miles drove with his hands at 10 and 2 and his eyes narrowed against the smear of taillights ahead. Chloe was buckled into the booster seat beside him. Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest, humming the theme song to some cartoon he didn't recognize. Why does she need help, Daddy? Her car broke. Is she scared? Probably. Chloe thought about this for a moment. We should bring her a juice box. We should. She twisted around and rummaged in the backseat cooler, emerging triumphant with an apple juice. Good thinking. I know. He saw the car before he saw her. A cherry red BMW M4, newer model. One of those cars that looked like money even when it was dead. It was pulled onto the shoulder with its hazards blinking in a weak, apologetic rhythm. Miles eased the truck in behind it, left his own hazards on, and killed the engine. Stay here, he told Chloe. Lock it after I get out. Don't roll the windows down for anybody but me. Okay, Daddy. He climbed out into the rain. She saw him in her side mirror and opened the door before he reached her, stepping out into the downpour in a cream-colored silk blouse and dark jeans that were clearly not built for weather. No jacket, just long brown hair plastered to her face and eyes that were too wide and too blue for the situation. You're Miles? I'm Miles. Get back in the car, ma'am. You're going to catch your death. I'm in the car, please. She laughed, a startled little sound, and ducked back into the driver's seat. Miles followed her around to the hood and propped it up. He flicked on his work light. He knew within 30 seconds what was wrong with it. He walked back around to her window. She rolled it down. She was shivering. Alternator shot, he said. Might be the battery too, but the alternator's definitely gone. You didn't hear any whining before it quit? I mean, maybe. I had the music up. You had the music up. I had a bad day at work. Yeah, well, your car had a worse one. She smiled. It was a crooked smile, a little embarrassed, and something behind Miles's sternum did a small, unhelpful thing. I can't fix it here, he said. I'll have to tow it back to my shop. I'm guessing you're not local. I'm visiting my grandmother in Ashford. I was driving back to the city tonight. Well, you're not driving to the city tonight. Not in this. Oh. You got somewhere to stay? I can get a hotel? The nearest decent one is 30 minutes out, and the not decent one is 15, and I wouldn't let my dog stay there, and I don't have a dog. She laughed again, tired and real. I'll figure it out. I always figure it out. Miles ran a hand down his face. Rain was getting in his eyes. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to winch your car up onto a flatbed. That'll take me 40 minutes once I get back to the shop and bring it here. In the meantime, you're going to sit in my truck with my daughter where it's warm and you're going to drink a juice box. Then I'm going to drive you to the Hampton off exit 14, which is the only place within 50 miles I'd put my own kid, and tomorrow morning you're going to come to my shop and we're going to figure out your car. She stared at him. You have a daughter. I have a daughter, and she's in the truck. She's in the truck. Miles, it's almost 10 o'clock. I'm aware. There was a beat. She looked at him like she was trying to work something out. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My truck heater works like it's mad at me. Chloe took to Avery the way she took to ice cream and new kittens. Instantly, completely, without consulting her father on the matter. By the time Miles had gotten the BMW winched up and secured on his flatbed, by the time he'd driven Avery and Chloe back to the shop and left Avery in the heated office while he finished loading her car, Chloe had already told Avery about her first-grade teacher, her missing front tooth, her opinion on broccoli, strongly negative, And her stuffed rabbit's full backstory, complicated, involved a divorce. Miles walked into the office, wiping his hands, and caught the tail end of it. And then Mr. Whiskers said he wasn't going to be friends with the bear anymore because the bear was mean. Wow, Avery said gravely. That's a lot. I know. Avery looked up at Miles. She'd wrapped herself in one of his old flannel shirts, the red one he kept on the hook by the door, and she looked so absurdly swallowed by it that he almost laughed. Her hair was drying in dark waves. She'd taken off her wet shoes and tucked her feet under her in the chair. She looked like she belonged there. That was the thing that bothered him. Your daughter is amazing, Avery said. Yeah, I know. She says you make her pancakes shaped like letters. She's 6. She's easily impressed. Daddy, the E is hard, Chloe said. The E is really hard. The E is really hard, Miles agreed. He grabbed his keys off the desk. Hampton, let's roll. Actually, Avery stood up, still wrapped in his flannel. This is going to sound weird. Would you be willing to just let me sit in the shop while you finish your other car? I saw the Lincoln. I don't want to put you out any more than I have. I can call an Uber from here in an hour when you're done. Uber won't come out this far past 10. Then I'll call a regular cab, please. I feel terrible. I interrupted your whole night. You didn't interrupt anything, Miles said. My whole night was going to be this. He gestured vaguely at the shop. Please, let me just sit here. I'll be quiet. I won't touch anything. Chloe piped up. She can read me a story. Chloe. What? I'm tired, and she's nice. Miles looked at his daughter. He looked at Avery. He looked at the Lincoln, which still needed another 30 minutes of his attention. Fine, but you're getting paid for babysitting. Absolutely not. Then I'm not fixing your car. Miles. Avery. She laughed, and there was something in the laugh that made him look away and pretend to check his phone. He worked on the Lincoln with one ear on the office. Avery read Chloe 3 picture books, then made up a 4th one about a rabbit who opened an auto repair shop in the forest. Chloe giggled so hard at one point Miles heard it over the compressor. He didn't remember when he'd last heard her laugh like that. He tried to remember and couldn't, and something in his chest tightened uncomfortably. When he was wiping down the last socket wrench, Chloe came out carrying her shoes. Daddy, I think I'm ready for bed. Yeah, you are. Can Avery come over? She can sleep on the couch. Chloe, no. Avery's going to a hotel. But, Chloe, hotel. Avery appeared in the office doorway, holding her own shoes. The hotel is fine. I really appreciate the offer, kiddo, but your dad's right. I've already taken up too much of his night. Oh. Chloe looked at her seriously. Well, can you come back tomorrow? I have to come back tomorrow. My car is here. Oh. Chloe's face lit up. Good. Miles shook his head and grabbed his jacket. Let's go, you two. Yeah. The Hampton was exactly where he remembered it, 12 minutes away. A 3-story brick building with a tired lobby and a night clerk reading a thriller novel. Avery tried to hand Miles her credit card for the tow and the labor, and he waved her off. Tomorrow, when I give you an actual bill. Miles, I have to pay you something tonight. You don't. I don't work that way. Then at least let me... Avery? He said her name for the first time. He hadn't meant to make it sound the way it came out. Go get dry. Get some sleep. I'll call you in the morning. She looked at him for a long second. He was aware suddenly of his oil-stained hands on the steering wheel, of the gray at his temples, of Chloe asleep in the back seat with her mouth slightly open, of the fact that this woman was probably 25 years old and lived in some apartment in the city with white walls and succulents and a boyfriend named Brandon who worked in finance. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Are you always this nice? He almost laughed. No, ma'am, I'm really not. She smiled and climbed out of the truck. He watched her walk into the lobby in his flannel shirt. She turned once at the door and lifted a hand. He lifted his back without thinking. He drove home with the radio off. Chloe was still asleep when he carried her into the house. She mumbled something into his shoulder that sounded like Avery's nice, but might have been anything. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. Then he went into the kitchen and made himself a cup of coffee he didn't need, and he stood at the counter in the dark, and he thought, very deliberately, about nothing. She came back the next morning at 9:15 in a yellow cab, wearing the same jeans but a new shirt she'd clearly bought at the CVS next to the Hampton, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She walked into the shop like she'd been there 100 times before. "Morning." "Morning." Miles didn't look up from the engine he was working on. "Alternator came in. I'll have it done by noon." "Great, thank you." "Chloe's at school if you were going to ask." "I wasn't." "You were. Maybe a little." He did look up then. She was holding 2 coffees from the shop down the block. She held one out to him. "I didn't know how you take it." "Black is fine." "Of course black is fine." She set his coffee down on the workbench and leaned against the bumper of the car next to the one he was working on, sipping her own. She didn't seem to mind getting dirty. She didn't seem to mind anything. "How long have you had this shop?" she asked. 4 years. Owned it 4 years. Worked in it 6 before that. The old owner retired and sold it to me." "Nice. Nice-ish. The margins are ugly and the building's old. You like it, though." "I like it." "Yeah." She took another sip. "You can tell." He wiped his hands and picked up the coffee. It was good. Better than the stuff he brewed at the shop. "What do you do?" he asked. "I work at my family's company." "What's the company do?" She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Real estate, development, boring stuff." "What?" "Nothing." "You made a sound." "I made a neutral sound." It was a judgmental neutral sound. Miles smiled. He didn't mean to. It came out before he could stop it. "Avery, your car was a $75,000 BMW. You don't have to oversell it." She laughed. There was something relieved in it. "Fair." "Your family rich?" "Yes." There's the sound again. Still neutral. Still judgmental. He took another sip of coffee and looked at her over the rim of the cup. She looked back. Something passed between them that he didn't have a name for and didn't want to find one for. The bell over the shop door jingled. Miles turned and his stomach dropped 2 inches. Dale Ruskin was standing in the doorway in a suit that cost more than the Lincoln. Miles hadn't seen Dale in 3 months, and he had been enjoying it. Dale owned Ruskin Automotive, a bigger shop 2 towns over, with a flashy sign and a staff of 12 and a marketing budget that let him run commercials on local cable. Dale had offered to buy Carter's auto the year Miles took it over. Miles had said no. Dale had offered again, higher. Miles had said no again. Dale had not liked that. "Carter." Dale smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Busy morning?" "Dale, what do you want?" "Easy. Just dropping by. Heard you were having trouble with your insurance renewal." Miles went still. "Where'd you hear that?" "Small town, Carter." Miles set the coffee down carefully. He didn't want his hands to shake, and if he put it down now, they couldn't. "I'm not selling." "Nobody said anything about selling." "Then what do you want, Dale?" Dale's eyes flicked over to Avery. He took her in, the jeans, the ponytail, the new CVS shirt, and misread her completely, which Miles could see happen in real time. "Didn't know you had company. Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't interrupt. She's a customer." "Sure she is." "Dale." "I'll swing by later, Miles. We'll talk." "We won't." Dale smiled again and walked out. The bell jingled, mockingly this time. Miles stood there staring at the door for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His hands were in fists at his sides, and he hadn't noticed putting them there. "Miles." Avery's voice was quiet. "Who was that?" "Nobody." "Miles." He turned to her. He tried to make his face normal. "Just a guy who wants my shop." "And your insurance renewal?" "It's fine. It's nothing." She looked at him. She didn't believe him. He could tell. But she didn't push. "Okay," she said. "Okay." He turned back to the alternator. She came back the next day. He hadn't expected her to. Her car was fixed, paid for, gone. She had no reason, but at 4:15, just as Miles was starting to close up, her yellow cab pulled into the lot, and she climbed out with a paper bag from the deli on Main. "I brought sandwiches." "Avery?" "I didn't know what you liked, so I got turkey, and also roast beef, and also a veggie one in case you're weird." "I'm not weird." "Good, I hate the veggie one." He stood there holding a shop rag, staring at her. She walked into the office and set the sandwiches down like she'd done it every day for a year. Where's Chloe? Her grandma's picking her up today, Wednesdays. Oh. She looked a little disappointed. Then she looked at him, and she looked less disappointed. I thought about going home today, she said. And? And I rented a car and decided to stay through the weekend. Avery. I know. Avery. I know, Miles. He set the rag down. You don't know me. I know. I'm 32 years old. I have a 6-year-old. I work 14 hours a day. I live in a 2-bedroom house with a leaky roof I haven't fixed in a year. I don't date. I don't want to date. I don't have room for... I know, Miles. Then what are you doing? She looked at him, and there was something careful and honest in her face. I don't know, she said. I really don't. I just know that when I was driving back to the city yesterday morning, I got as far as exit 22 and I turned around. And I don't usually turn around. He didn't say anything. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I just wanted to bring you a sandwich. He looked down at the paper bag. Turkey, he said. Yeah? I'll take the turkey. She smiled, small and real. Okay. They ate the sandwiches standing up in the office. Chloe wasn't there. The rain had stopped sometime that morning. The light through the dusty windows was gold and slanted and a little too warm for October. Miles thought, very briefly, that he hadn't eaten a meal with another adult in his shop in years, and then he didn't let himself think it again. Outside, across the street, Dale Ruskin's black Escalade rolled slowly past the lot, and neither of them saw it. The sandwich wrapper crinkled in his hand long after he'd finished eating. Miles stood at the office window, watching Avery's rental car, a boring white Toyota that looked wrong in his lot, the way a house cat looks wrong in a barn, and tried to do the arithmetic of what had just happened. She had driven past exit 22 and turned around. She had rented a car. She had bought him a turkey sandwich. These were small facts. They were also, somehow, an avalanche. You're thinking too loud, Avery said from behind him. I'm not thinking. Miles, I can hear you thinking from over here. He turned. She was leaning against the filing cabinet, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that was half amusement and half something softer that he didn't want to name. I've got another car to finish, he said. Okay. I mean, I've got to work. I figured that's what another car to finish meant. Avery, I'm not stopping you. You kind of are, though. She tilted her head. Her ponytail slid off one shoulder. She didn't move. Miles, I'm going to be honest with you about something. Oh, no. I know. But listen, I'm not some... She made a vague gesture with her hand. I'm not trying to play a game here. I'm not going to show up every day and make you uncomfortable. That's not what this is. I brought you a sandwich. You ate the sandwich. I'm going to leave in about 10 minutes and let you work. And then tomorrow, if you want, I'll come by and say hi. And if you don't want that, you can tell me, and I'll drive back to the city, and that'll be that. He looked at her for a long moment. You always talk this much? No. She smiled. You bring it out in me. Great. I'll leave now. You don't have to. I'm going to. She gathered her purse off the desk. At the doorway, she paused. Miles. Yeah? What you did the other night. Stopping. Bringing your daughter. Not acting like I was an idiot for standing in the rain. She adjusted the strap of her bag. You don't know how rare that is. Where I come from, nobody stops for anybody unless there's something in it for them. That's a sad place to come from. I know. She left. The bell jingled. Miles stood in the office for a minute that felt like longer, and then he went back out to the Lincoln, which Mrs. Patterson had already come and picked up, and found himself standing in an empty bay with his hands in his pockets and nothing to do with them. His mother's house smelled like cinnamon and old carpet, which was exactly as it had smelled his entire life. Louise Carter had lived in the same 2-bedroom ranch on the edge of town since 1989, and she saw no reason to change anything about it except the curtains, which she rotated through 4 seasonal sets that Miles could not have described under threat of death. She fell asleep doing homework, Louise said, meeting him at the door. She kept her voice low. I let her be. I hope that's okay. That's fine. There's meatloaf in the fridge. I wrapped you a piece. Mom, you don't... Miles Patrick Carter, if you tell me I don't have to feed my son one more time, I'm going to hit you with a spoon. Yes, ma'am. She led him down the hall. Chloe was asleep on the floor of the guest room, curled up on the rug with a math worksheet under her cheek and 3 markers rolled against her leg. Mr. Whiskers was tucked into the crook of her arm. She'd drawn an elaborate rabbit on the back of her worksheet. "I can carry her out," Miles said. "Have some coffee first. You look like hell." "Thanks, Mom." I call him how I see him. He followed her back to the kitchen. She poured 2 mugs and slid one across the table. Louise was 64 and had been a widow for 11 years. She had her father's cheekbones and her mother's stubbornness and a way of looking at her only son that made him feel, at 32, exactly 9 years old. She looked at him now. "So," she said. "So what?" "So who is she?" Miles blinked. "What?" "The woman." "Mom, Chloe told me you helped a lady whose car broke and she came back to the shop and she reads good bedtime stories and she doesn't make broccoli face when Chloe says she doesn't like broccoli." Chloe said all that. Chloe said all that in about 40 seconds, including the part about the broccoli face. Miles dragged a hand down his jaw. "It's nothing." "Mom, it is nothing. She was a customer. Her car broke down. I fixed it. She's gone." "She's gone?" "She's in town till the weekend." "Oh." "It's nothing." Louise took a sip of her coffee. She watched him over the rim in a way that was exactly the way he'd watched Avery earlier that afternoon, and he was suddenly sure he'd inherited the expression from her, the way you inherit a nose or a bad back. "Miles." "Yeah." "How long has it been since Sarah?" "Mom, don't." 5 years, Miles." "I know how long. 5 years is a long time." "I'm aware, Mom." She reached across the table and took his hand. Her hand was smaller than his and warmer, and he could feel the ring she'd never taken off, even 11 years after his father died. "I'm not telling you to fall in love with a stranger," she said. "I'm telling you to let yourself eat a sandwich without feeling like you're betraying your daughter." Miles was quiet for a long time. "How do you know about the sandwich?" "I'm your mother. I just know." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." She squeezed his hand once and let go. "Carry your baby home, son." Chloe stirred when he lifted her, but didn't wake. In the truck, halfway home, with the streetlights ticking past in even orange pulses, she said into his shoulder, "Daddy?" "Yeah, kid." "Is Avery coming tomorrow?" "I don't know, baby. I want her to." "You like her, huh?" "She smells like flowers." "Okay. Not girl flowers, just flowers. That clears it up, thank you." "You're welcome." She was asleep again before they reached the driveway. Avery came the next day at 4, and the day after, and the day after that. She never stayed long. She never made herself a fixture. She brought coffee in the morning and sometimes a sandwich in the afternoon, and she talked to Chloe when Chloe was there and read her books she pulled from a tote bag she'd started carrying. Chloe called the tote bag the library. On Thursday, she brought a small bouquet of wildflowers from the farmer's market and stuck them in an old oil can Miles had emptied out and handed her when she asked for a vase. The oil can sat on his workbench. The flowers were yellow and white and purple. Miles would not have said, out loud, that he looked up every time the bell over the shop door jingled. But he did. On Friday afternoon, she came in holding a small gift bag. "Before you say anything," she said, "it's for Chloe." "Avery." "It's a $6 set of markers from the drugstore." "Avery." "She told me on Wednesday her good markers ran out." Miles sighed. Chloe, who had been doing her homework at the office desk, bolted out of the office at the sound of Avery's voice and grabbed the bag before he could say anything about it. Inside were 24 markers in a clear plastic case. Chloe shrieked with the pure, helpless joy of a 6-year-old presented with new colors. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart." Chloe hugged her around the middle, fiercely, and ran back to the office to try every color on a single piece of paper. Avery looked at Miles. "I should have asked first. I'm sorry." "No, it's fine." "I'm really sorry. I got excited." "Avery, it's fine." She fidgeted with the strap of her bag. It was the first time he'd seen her look unsure of herself. "I leave Sunday night," she said. "I know." "I don't know when I'm coming back." "Yeah." A long beat. "Miles." "Yeah." Would you and Chloe have dinner with me tomorrow night? Just dinner, somewhere with menus." He stared at her. I've been coming to your shop for 5 days, she said, and I'd like to sit across from you at a table where nobody's holding a wrench. He opened his mouth. He closed it. Chloe would like it, Avery added, and immediately winced. I'm sorry, that was unfair. Don't use her as a reason. Avery. I know. Yes. She blinked. Yes? Yes. Dinner. Oh. She laughed, a little breathless. Okay, great. I don't know any restaurants around here. I was going to ask you, there's an Italian place on Maple, Rossi's. It's good. Chloe likes the pasta. Rossi's, perfect. 6:30. 6:30. She smiled. It was the biggest smile he had seen on her, and it hit him somewhere low and unfamiliar, and he thought, for the first time in 5 years, oh no. That evening, he was cleaning up the shop when the bell jingled again. He didn't look up. Did you forget something? He said. I don't forget much. Miles froze. That wasn't Avery's voice. He turned. The man in the doorway was maybe 60, tall and lean, in the way that expensive men stayed lean, in a charcoal suit and a wool overcoat he hadn't bothered to button against the cold. His hair was silver and expensive. His watch was expensive. The car behind him in the parking lot, a long black Mercedes sedan with a driver still sitting in the front seat, was expensive. Everything about him was quiet, the way only real money is quiet. Can I help you? Miles said. Are you Miles Carter? Yeah. The man walked in slowly, unhurried, the way a cat enters a room. He looked around the shop without appearing to judge it, which was somehow worse than if he had. My name is Robert Quinn, the man said. I believe you've met my daughter. Miles's whole body went quiet. Avery. Avery. Miles set the rag down. He wiped his hands on his jeans. He made himself not move his feet, which had wanted to shift, involuntarily, into the stance he took when he was about to get into a fistfight at 19 in a bar parking lot. Mr. Quinn? Call me Robert. I'll call you Mr. Quinn. Robert Quinn smiled. It was a smile with no warmth in it, and Miles had seen the same smile on Dale Ruskin 2 days earlier, and it occurred to him that all men who wanted things from him smiled the same way. Fair enough. What do you want, Mr. Quinn? I want to understand my daughter's situation. Her car got fixed. She paid her bill. There's no situation. She's been in your shop every afternoon for 5 days, Mr. Carter. She's a friendly woman. I don't charge for visits. I'm sure you don't. Robert looked at the flowers on the workbench, the yellow, white, purple wildflowers in the old oil can. He looked at them for just a second too long. May I be direct? Robert said. I wish you would. My daughter is 26 years old. She graduated near the top of her class at a school you've heard of. She runs a division of a company her grandfather started with nothing in 1958 and turned, by the time he died, into a portfolio of real estate holdings worth a little over $3 billion. Robert's eyes returned to Miles. She has had 3 serious relationships, all of which ended badly. The last one because the young man decided he was more interested in the trust than the woman. She has, as a result, developed a taste for what she calls authenticity. Do you know what authenticity looks like to a 26-year-old heiress, Mr. Carter? I don't. It looks a great deal like you. Miles didn't answer. I have been through this, Robert said. Several times. I know how this ends. She will be fascinated by the hands. She will be charmed by the daughter. She will tell herself she is in love with the shop and the coffee and the honesty. And then 6 months from now, or 8 or 12, she will wake up next to you in that 2-bedroom house with the leaky roof. How do you know about my roof? And she will realize that authenticity is exhausting, Mr. Carter. That struggle is not romantic when it is your own life. That a mechanic's budget does not accommodate the things she has always taken for granted. And she will leave. Not cruelly. She is not cruel. But she will leave, and she will take a piece of your daughter with her when she goes. Because your daughter, I understand, is already taken with her. Miles's hands had curled into fists. He had not meant for them to. He forced them open. Is that a threat, Mr. Quinn? No, Mr. Carter. It is a mercy. I am telling you how this story ends so that you can choose not to write the middle. You don't know me. I know enough. You don't know your daughter either, apparently. Excuse me? You just told me a whole story about her like she's a character in your book. She's a person. She gets to decide who she spends time with. She is my daughter. She's also 26. You said it yourself. The silver-haired man regarded him for a long moment. Something shifted, fractionally, behind his eyes. Not warmth. Reassessment. What is it that you want, Mr. Carter? For you to leave my shop. Before that, I don't want anything from her. I want to close up, go home, make dinner for my kid, and go to bed. That's it. You've agreed to have dinner with her tomorrow. Miles stared. How do you know that? I know a great deal. She told you. No. Then how? Mr. Carter. Robert Quinn reached into his inside breast pocket and produced a slim leather billfold. He withdrew, from it, a single business card, heavy cream cardstock with black lettering. He placed it on the workbench next to the oil can of wildflowers. If you were to decide of your own free will that a relationship with my daughter was not in anyone's interest, hers, yours, your daughter's, I would consider that decision a significant kindness, and I am in a position to be significantly grateful. Miles looked at the card. He did not pick it up. Get out of my shop. Mr. Carter, get out of my shop, Mr. Quinn. Robert Quinn inclined his head, a small, courteous gesture, as if Miles had said something reasonable. Think about it. He walked out. The bell jingled. The Mercedes pulled away. Miles stood alone in the shop for a long time, staring at the card on his workbench. He didn't touch it. He didn't read the number. Eventually, he walked over, picked it up between two fingers, and dropped it into the garbage can. Then he sat down hard on the rolling stool, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. He was still sitting like that when the bell jingled again 10 minutes later and Avery walked in holding a small paper bag. I forgot to give you... She stopped. Miles, what's wrong? Your dad came by. Her face went white. Oh no. Yeah. Oh no. Miles, what did he say? He offered me money. Oh my... She dropped into the chair by the door, hands over her mouth. Oh my... Miles... I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't do it. I should have warned you. I knew he was going to do something eventually. I always know, and I didn't. Avery, I'm so sorry, Miles. Avery, stop. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet and furious and ashamed all at once. I didn't take the money, he said. I know you didn't. You know? Of course I know. He wiped a hand down his face. He said you'd leave in 6 months. What? 6 months? 8? 12? He said the honeymoon ends and authenticity is exhausting and you'll go back to your life and take a piece of Chloe with you when you do. Avery stood up. Her hands were shaking. Miles, I'm just telling you what he said. Miles, look at me. He looked. I'm not him, she said. I'm not them. I don't want what they want. I've never wanted what they want. That's why I got 3 degrees I don't use and took the smallest division at the company so I wouldn't have to see him every day. That's why I was driving home alone at 9 at night in the rain instead of having someone come get me. That's why I was in this stupid town visiting my grandmother, who is the only person in my family who doesn't terrify me. Her voice cracked. Miles, I turned around at exit 22 because for the first time in about 15 years, someone looked at me like I was a person and not a checkbook. And I didn't want to drive back to being a checkbook, Avery. I know it's been 5 days, I know. I know it sounds crazy, but please don't let him decide this for us before we even... Miles stood up. He was across the shop before he'd decided to be. He wasn't good at this, any of it. He hadn't touched anyone in 5 years, and he didn't know what he was doing, but he put his hands on either side of her face, oil-stained thumbs against her cheekbones, and said very quietly, I threw his card in the trash. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Miles, I'm not saying yes to anything, okay? I'm not making any promises. I'm a mess, and my shop is a mess, and my life is a mess, and I have a daughter who thinks the sun comes up in your pocket, and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't either. Then we'll figure it out. Okay? Okay. He didn't kiss her. He thought about it. He didn't. It wasn't the moment. It was a moment, but it wasn't the moment, and he wanted the first time to not happen with her father's ghost still in the room. He pressed his forehead against hers instead, just for a second, and she closed her eyes. Then he stepped back. "I'm going to go get my kid from school," he said. "Okay. 6:30 tomorrow still?" 6:30 still. She left. He locked up. He walked out to his truck and stood in the parking lot for a minute looking up at the sky, which was already going dark. And then he got in and he drove. At Rossi's the next night, Chloe ordered spaghetti with meatballs and ate a single meatball and then colored on the kids' menu for 40 minutes, while Miles and Avery talked about nothing in particular. She told him about her grandmother, who had been a librarian and had made her read Steinbeck at 11. He told her about his father, who had died when Miles was 21, and who had taught him everything he knew about engines and most of what he knew about keeping his word. She told him about the apartment in the city with the white walls, which did in fact have succulents, and she laughed when he said he had guessed. He told her about Sarah without saying Sarah's name, just enough that she understood without asking, and she put her hand over his across the table without making a thing of it, and left it there for maybe 3 seconds, and then moved it so she could pick up her water glass. And he was grateful, more than he could say, that she hadn't tried to make it a moment. Chloe fell asleep at the table with a red crayon in her hand. Avery paid the bill before he could argue. He let her, because he was tired, and because he had the sense that she needed to do something. Outside in the parking lot, the wind had picked up. "Miles." "Yeah." "Can I see you tomorrow before I leave?" "Yeah." "Okay." "Okay." He opened the truck door and strapped Chloe into the booster. When he turned around, Avery was standing closer than he'd expected, and she went up on her toes and kissed his cheek, once, light and dry, the way you kiss a friend or a brother or something that isn't the thing itself. "Drive safe," she said. "You too." She walked to her rental. He watched until she'd pulled out. He watched until her taillights had disappeared. Then he got in his truck, and he drove home with his daughter asleep in the back seat, and he thought, for the first time since Sarah had left, that he did not feel like the sky was on top of him. The next morning, Miles opened the shop at 7, and he didn't see the envelope on the floor until 7:15. It had been slipped under the bay door overnight, plain white business envelope, no name on the outside, no return address. He frowned and picked it up. It was heavy, too heavy for paper. He carried it to the office. He opened it. Inside was a single photograph and a single sheet of paper. The photograph was of his shop, Carter's Auto and Body, taken from the street sometime recently. There was a red circle drawn around the small sign in the window that displayed his business license. The paper was a photocopy of a letter from the state's Department of Commerce. It was an official complaint form. 3 complaints had been filed in the last 72 hours against Carter's Auto and Body for, variously, overcharging customers, using counterfeit parts, and failing to return a customer's vehicle in the promised time frame. Names he didn't recognize, dates that made no sense. Mrs. Patterson's name was not on it, but a name that sounded a little like hers was. Clipped to the paper was a yellow sticky note. The handwriting was small and neat. "Thought you should see it before the inspector does. We can still talk." Dale Miles stood very still in the office with the paper in his hand. His mouth tasted like copper. He looked through the office window at the wildflowers Avery had put in the oil can on his workbench. They were already starting to wilt. The phone rang. He picked it up. "Carter's Auto." "Mr. Carter?" A woman's voice, professional, a little nasal. "This is Karen Whitfield, State Department of Commerce. I'm following up on some complaints filed against your shop. We'd like to schedule an inspection for Monday morning. Would 9 a.m. work for you?" Miles closed his eyes. "Yeah," he said. 9 a.m. works. He hung up the phone. He looked at the photograph on his desk. He looked at the flowers. He looked at the small blue ceramic mug Chloe had made him in kindergarten, sitting on the corner of the desk, holding pens. And somewhere, in the back of his head, Robert Quinn's quiet voice said, "Struggle is not romantic when it is your own life." Miles crumpled the photograph in his fist. The photograph fit in his fist the way bad news always did, which was perfectly. Miles sat down hard in the office chair and dropped the crumpled paper on the desk. His hands were shaking. He didn't want them to be shaking, but he also didn't have the energy to argue with them. He pressed both palms flat against the desktop and stared at the wood grain like it might tell him something he needed to know. 3 complaints. 72 hours. An inspection on Monday morning. He did math in his head, the ugly kind. The kind that had nothing to do with engines. If the Department of Commerce opened a file on him, his insurance carrier would hear about it within a week. If his insurance carrier heard about it, they'd either drop him or hike the premium to something that looked like rent. Either way, he couldn't operate. Without operating, he couldn't pay the mortgage on the shop building, which he'd leveraged to buy from the old owner. Without the mortgage, the bank would take the building. Without the building, he was a 32-year-old mechanic with a 6-year-old kid and no savings, and a rented house with a leaky roof. He could see the whole thing play out in about 11 seconds. The phone rang again. He didn't pick it up. The answering machine, an ancient cassette tape model he'd never bothered replacing, clicked on, and a man's voice, somebody he half recognized from the Chamber of Commerce, said something about rescheduling a meeting. Miles listened without hearing. When the message ended, the shop was quiet. The compressor had cycled off. The radio was low. Outside, a truck went by on the road, and its tires hissed on wet pavement, and Miles thought, absurdly, I'm going to lose her anyway, so I might as well lose her now. He picked up his phone. He scrolled to her contact. Avery Q. He stared at it for a long time. He put the phone face down on the desk. He walked out to the bay and picked up a socket wrench and started working on a transmission that didn't need him yet because his hands needed to be doing something, or he was going to put one of them through a wall. Chloe was at her grandmother's that night. Saturday night meant Louise took her to the diner on 5th and let her order a milkshake, and the two of them played 7 games of checkers on the napkin-checkered tablecloths while Louise pretended not to see Chloe cheat. It was a tradition, it was sacred, and Miles was glad for it tonight because it meant he didn't have to look at his daughter's face while he talked himself into what he was about to do. He drove to the Hampton. Avery opened the door in jeans and a t-shirt and bare feet, hair still damp from a shower, and her face did a small, complicated thing when she saw him. Surprise first, then pleasure, then concern, in the space of about 2 seconds. Miles, I was just going to... What's wrong? Can I come in? Of course you can come in. He came in. The room was small and clean and smelled faintly like her shampoo. A small suitcase was open on the luggage rack, half packed. She'd been getting ready to leave. You want water? She said. I have Avery. Or, Avery, stop. She stopped. She looked at him. She knew, somehow, already. Oh no. Yeah. Miles. I can't do this. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She did it slowly, like her legs had gone. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Talk to me. Your dad was right. Miles. Not about you. Not about what he said, about the shitstorm, He pushed both hands into his hair. Avery, somebody dropped an envelope under my bay door last night. 3 complaints filed against my shop. State inspection Monday morning. Fake names, fake charges. It's a setup. Dale Ruskin, the guy who came in the other day, he's been trying to force me out for a year and a half, and he finally found a way to... Miles. To ruin me. Like actually ruin me. And Miles, slow down. I don't have time to slow down, Avery. I have until Monday morning to figure out how to defend a shop that hasn't done anything wrong against people who've been paid to say it did. And if I lose everything. The shop, the house, all of it. And he stopped. He had to stop. His voice was going somewhere he didn't want it to go. And, Avery said, and I don't have room for anything else. Not right now. Not even you. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was careful and steady. Miles, let me help. No. Miles. No, Avery. I have resources. I have lawyers. That's exactly why no. What? He sat down in the chair by the desk. He couldn't stand anymore. Avery, if you come in and save me, this doesn't work. Ever. Not next month, not next year, not ever. Because every single time something goes wrong for the rest of our lives, I'm going to be the guy whose rich girlfriend bailed him out. And I'm going to know it, and you're going to know it, and eventually Chloe's going to know it. And that's not a life. That's a novelty show that ends in a divorce. Miles, that's not... It is. It absolutely is. Your dad knew exactly what he was doing when he came to my shop, Avery. He knew exactly what to say. And I threw his card in the trash, and I meant it. But the problem isn't your dad. The problem is me. The problem is I'm in a hole right now that is too deep to climb out of with somebody else's ladder. I gotta climb it with my own hands, or it doesn't count. Why does it have to count? Because I have a kid, Avery. Because I have to look at her every morning and know I earned what I earned. Because the day she's 16 and something goes sideways in her life, I want her to know her dad figured it out. Not her dad's girlfriend figured it out. Her dad. I could be her dad's girlfriend who helped. Not with this, you couldn't. Not this time. She looked at him. Her eyes were wet. She was trying not to let it show. So what are you saying? I'm saying go home. Miles. Go home, Avery. Go back to the city. Go back to your job. Figure out what you're doing with your life. I can't be a thing you figure out. I'm a whole situation. I don't want to go. I know. Miles. I know, Avery, I know. She stood up. She crossed the room to him. He stayed in the chair because if he stood, he'd pull her in. And if he pulled her in, he wouldn't be able to finish the sentence he'd come here to say. So he stayed seated, and she stood in front of him with her arms wrapped around herself. Tell me you don't feel it, she said quietly. Don't do that. Tell me, Miles. I'm not going to tell you that. Then don't send me away. I'm not sending you away because I don't feel it. I'm sending you away because I do. That doesn't even... I know it doesn't. I know. He stood up then. He couldn't help it. He put a hand on the side of her face, and she leaned into it, and he could feel the wet of her tears on his oil-stained thumb. You deserve someone who can give you a whole person, he said. Right now I'm not a whole person. I'm a guy with a shop that's about to go under and a daughter who needs me and no room for anything else. If in a month or 6 months or a year I get out from under this, and if you're not already with somebody else, and if you still feel like driving past exit 22. Don't make it a speech, Miles. I'm not making it a speech. You're making it a speech. Don't. Okay? She closed her eyes. He watched a tear run down past his thumb and into the collar of her t-shirt. Can I say something? She said. Yeah. You're wrong. Avery, you're wrong, Miles. You think the mature thing is to push me away. You think the grown-up thing is to handle it alone. You think Chloe needs a dad who figured it all out by himself? I'm telling you, as someone who grew up in a house where everybody handled everything by themselves, you're wrong. It just makes people lonely. It doesn't make them strong. He didn't answer. But I'm going to go, she said. Because you asked me to. Because I respect you too much not to, okay? Okay? But I'm telling you, you're wrong. Okay? She stepped back. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the way Chloe did when she was trying not to cry at school. Can I say goodbye to Chloe? No. Miles. Avery, no. I can't. She won't understand. I can't put that on her. Can I send her a card, something for her birthday? It's in March, right? March 16th. He swallowed. Yeah, a card's fine. Okay. Okay. She stood there a moment longer. She looked at him the way you look at a door closing. Get out of here, Miles. Avery, get out of here before I... Just get out of here, please. He went. He sat in his truck in the Hampton parking lot for 7 minutes before he could make his hands turn the key. When he finally drove home, he took the long way, through the country roads behind town, because he didn't want to go past the shop or past his mother's house or past anything that might look at him and ask what was wrong. He got home at 9:30. The house was dark. He stood in the driveway and looked at the living room window and remembered that Chloe was at Louise's, and for a moment he couldn't move, because walking into an empty house felt like a thing he could not physically do. He walked in anyway. He woke at 4 in the morning. He didn't fight it. He got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a yellow legal pad. At the top of the page he wrote, "What I know." Underneath, he wrote a list. 3 complaints, filed within 72 hours of each other. Names he didn't recognize, and one name that was almost right. Almost the name of an actual customer, but not quite. Dale Ruskin had access to his customer list somehow. That was the first thing. How did Dale Ruskin get his customer list? He thought about it. He chewed the end of the pen. 3 months ago, Miles had hired a part-time kid named Jared Kuhn to help out with intake and paperwork on weekends. Jared was 19, took community college classes in the mornings, and was, Miles had thought, a decent kid. Jared had access to the customer database. Jared had quit, without much notice, 6 weeks ago, saying he'd gotten a better offer at another shop. A better offer at another shop. Miles wrote Jared's name on the legal pad and circled it twice. He wrote, "Where is Jared working now?" Then he wrote, "Cameras?" His shop had one camera, mounted over the front door, installed 3 years ago after somebody had broken in and taken 4 battery chargers. The camera recorded to a hard drive that sat under the front counter. Miles had never once reviewed the footage. He wasn't sure he even remembered the password. He wrote, "Check camera. 72 hours back, minimum." Then he wrote, "Mrs. Patterson." Mrs. Patterson was 81 years old, and she went to church with approximately 47% of the women in town, and if somebody had used her name, or a name close to hers, to file a false complaint about an overcharge at his shop, she was going to be, he suspected, extremely motivated to help him prove it. He wrote, "Call Mrs. P at 9 a.m. Not before. She's at early service." He looked at the list. Then, at the bottom of the page, he wrote one more thing. Avery. He stared at the name for a long time. He crossed it out. He put the pen down and drank the rest of his coffee cold. Louise Carter brought Chloe home at 10:30 Sunday morning, and when she saw Miles's face, she sent Chloe into the backyard with a popsicle and closed the kitchen door behind her and said, "Talk." Miles talked. He told her about the envelope. He told her about Dale. He told her about Jared. He did not at first tell her about Avery, but Louise was Louise, and she waited until he was done with the shop part and then folded her hands and said, "And? And what? And where's the girl?" "Mom? Miles. I sent her home." Louise did something Miles had not often seen her do. She closed her eyes. She pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose, and she said very quietly, "Oh, baby." "Mom, I had to." "No, you didn't." "Mom." "Miles Patrick, look at me." He looked. "Your father," Louise said. "When the plant closed in 2002, when he lost that job, when we didn't know how we were going to keep the house, you remember what he did?" "Mom, do you remember what he did, Miles?" "He took the job at the depot." "Before that? Do you remember what he did before that?" Miles didn't answer. "He sat me down at this table. This table, right here, and he told me everything, every dollar we didn't have, every bill that was late, every phone call from the bank. He told me because he knew, and this is the thing I need you to hear, son, he knew that the worst thing you can do to somebody who loves you is not tell them. The worst thing is not asking for help. The worst thing is deciding all by yourself in your own head that they can't handle it, because that's not protecting them. That's just being a coward with good PR. Mom, I'm not done. Okay. You are not your father, Miles. You've got good of him in you, and you've got some of my stubborn in you, which isn't a gift, I'll tell you that. But one thing you have got, that you came by honest from both of us, is this idea that loving somebody means handling everything alone so they don't have to worry. And it is the stupidest idea in our whole family, and I am telling you right now, if you sent that girl home because you wanted to protect her, you have made the exact same mistake your daddy almost made in 2002. The only reason he didn't was because I didn't let him. Miles was quiet. She offered to help, Louise said. Didn't she? Yeah. And you said no because you thought it'd make you less of a man. I said no because I have a daughter, Mom. I can't have her first memory of somebody in my life be the woman who saved my business for me. I can't. Louise reached across the table and took his hand. Son, that girl is not going to save your business. You are. You are going to save your business because you are your father's son and you've got a customer list 600 names deep of people who love you and you're going to go win Monday. But sitting at a kitchen table with somebody who loves you and saying, I'm scared, that is not being saved. That is just being loved, and those are not the same thing. Miles didn't trust himself to speak for a moment. She's on a train back to the city, he said finally. Is she? Yeah. You got her number. I got her number. Then stop sitting here running your mouth at me. Before he called her, he did two things. First, he called Mrs. Patterson. She picked up on the second ring, and she was, just as he'd predicted, coming back from early service and willing to listen. When he read her the complaint that had been filed under a name that was almost hers, Patricia Patterson, instead of Priscilla, and when he read her the claim that she had been overcharged for work on a 2003 Buick, She let out a small sound that was not appropriate for a woman who had just come from church. "Miles Carter," she said, "I have never owned a Buick in my life." "No, ma'am. And I paid you $600 for work on my town car last Tuesday, which is exactly what you quoted me, because I was there when you quoted me." "Yes, ma'am." "Who do I need to call?" "I'm going to give you a number, Mrs. Patterson. You give me that number, Miles, and you tell me what else I can do, because if somebody is using my good name to run a con, I'm not going to be polite about it. I'll come by this afternoon. You do that, and bring your daughter. I made too much pie." Second, he went to the shop. He did not go to the office. He went under the front counter, pulled out the dusty hard drive connected to the single camera, and took it home. He had a neighbor, Dennis, who worked IT at the hospital and owed him 3 oil changes. He called Dennis. Dennis came over. Dennis spent 45 minutes at the kitchen table with Miles hovering behind him, and then Dennis said, "Yeah, I can pull the last 30 days. Give me till tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning's too late. My inspection's at 9. Then give me till tonight. Thank you, Dennis." "You're welcome. Tell your kid I say hi." Chloe, from the living room. "Hi, Dennis." Dennis grinned. Miles walked out onto the back porch with his phone in his hand. He sat down on the top step. It was a cold, bright Sunday afternoon. The sky was the kind of blue you only got in October. Somewhere, a neighbor was burning leaves, which was illegal in the county, and the smell of it caught in the back of his throat. He pulled up Avery's contact. He stared at it. He pressed call. It rang 4 times. He was about to hang up. She picked up on the 5th. "Miles? Hey, are you okay?" No, she was quiet. "Are you on the train?" he said. "I missed the train." "You missed it." "I missed it on purpose." "Avery, I couldn't do it. I got to the platform and I couldn't. I'm at my grandmother's." He pressed the heel of his hand against his eye. "I was wrong," he said. "Miles, I was wrong last night. My mom yelled at me this morning. She was right. You were right. I was wrong. Miles, slow down. I don't want you to save me. I don't. I still don't. But I shouldn't have sent you away for offering. I was too embarrassed to even let you be in the same room as the problem. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to either of us. And my mom said something about my dad, and Miles. And I realized that I was about to make the same mistake he almost made, and Miles, breathe." He stopped. He breathed. "Where are you?" she said. "My back porch. Can I come over?" "Yeah. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Okay." "Miles?" "Yeah. I'm really glad you called." "Me too." He hung up. He sat on the porch and watched the leaves come down in the neighbor's yard for a long time. And he didn't cry because he wasn't a man who cried. But he put his face in his hands for about 90 seconds, and when he lifted it, his eyes were red. She came over in the rental car. She pulled into his driveway like she'd done it 100 times, even though it was the first. She got out carrying a paper bag, because she couldn't not, apparently. And when she walked up the porch steps, Chloe opened the front door before Miles could, and Chloe threw herself at Avery's legs and said, "You came back!" "I came back, sweetheart. Daddy said you went home. I was going to, but I didn't." "Why?" Avery looked at Miles over the top of Chloe's head. "Because I missed your dad," she said. "Oh." Chloe considered this. "Me too." Miles cleared his throat. "Chloe, go play in your room for 10 minutes, okay?" "Are you going to talk grown up?" "Yeah." "Okay." Chloe hugged Avery one more time, fiercely, and ran inside. "I'm going to my room." "Got it, kid." Avery stepped into the doorway. She looked for a second at the inside of his house, the small living room with the second-hand couch, the kids' books stacked on the coffee table, the crayon drawings taped crooked to the fridge through the kitchen doorway. And he watched her take it in, and he waited for her to look different, or to flinch, or to try to hide something in her face. She didn't. "It's nice," she said. "It's not nice. It's lived in." "That's a real estate word." "I know. Sorry." He laughed for the first time in about 36 hours. It was short and rusty and genuine. "Come in," he said. "I'll make coffee." She sat at his kitchen table with her hands around a mug, and he told her everything he hadn't told her the night before. He told her about Jared. He told her about the camera footage Dennis was pulling. He told her about Mrs. Patterson and the pie. He told her about the inspection Monday morning and what he planned to say and what he planned to bring, the real customer list, the real invoices, the real numbers, the real misses. Patterson with her real town car and her real willingness to raise hell on his behalf in front of a state inspector. She listened without interrupting. When he was done, she said, "Miles, yeah. Can I say something now that isn't going to sound like what it sounded like last night?" "Yeah. My family owns the biggest real estate firm in the tri-state area. I have spent my entire life in rooms with men like Dale Ruskin. I have watched my father and my uncles and my grandfather eat men like Dale Ruskin for breakfast. I am not offering to save your shop. I am offering to tell you exactly what Dale Ruskin is going to do next, because I have seen the playbook 100 times, and I can see his next 6 moves from here." Miles looked at her. "His next 6 moves?" "Yeah, like specifically." "Specifically, starting with, he's going to leak the complaint to the local paper so that by the time your inspection comes in clean, the damage to your reputation is already done." Miles closed his eyes. And then he's going to make a public offer to buy your shop at below market value, framed as a rescue. Local community leader steps in to save struggling neighbor. And when you refuse, he's going to start calling your biggest customers and whispering that you're going under, so they should move their work to him before you close. And then, stop. "Miles." "Avery, stop, I believe you." She stopped. "What do I do?" he said. "You get in front of it before Monday." "How?" "You give your side of the story to the paper first, before he does. Not the whole story. You don't want to smear him. You want to get out ahead of the inspection so that when they print the complaint, it already has an answer next to it." "Who at the paper?" "Give me half an hour." "Half an hour for what?" "My grandmother has lived in this county for 51 years, Miles. She knows every reporter at that paper by their first name and their second marriage. Let me call her. Just let me call her." He looked at her. "That's not saving me," he said slowly. "No, it's not. You're going to walk in there Monday morning with a clean shop and a truthful file and a camera hard drive and an 81-year-old woman named Priscilla Patterson who is going to terrify a state inspector. That's you saving you. I am just making a phone call so that when the paper prints Dale's story, it's next to yours. That is not a rescue. That is a friend passing you a phone." He stared at her a moment longer. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. Just took it. Not a grand gesture. Not a moment. He wrapped his hand around hers and held it, and she turned her hand over under his and laced their fingers together, and neither one of them said anything for a while. From the hallway, Chloe's voice, "Daddy, can I come out now?" "Yeah, kid." She came running. She stopped short when she saw their hands. Her eyes got very big. She didn't say anything. She just climbed up into the chair between them and helped herself to Avery's coffee spoon and started stirring her father's coffee for him, like she had been doing it her whole life. Avery looked at Miles. Miles looked at Avery. He didn't let go of her hand. Outside, across town, at Ruskin Automotive, Dale Ruskin stood in his office window and watched his service manager load a van with something that was not a transmission. And somewhere in the city, Robert Quinn sat down at his desk and picked up his phone because his daughter had just sent him a text message that contained only 3 words. "Back off, Dad." Robert Quinn read the text 3 times before he put the phone down. "Back off, Dad." He sat at his desk in the study of the house in Greenwich, the one his wife had decorated 12 years ago and died in 6 years ago. And he looked at the 3 words, and he did something he had not done in a very long time. He sat there and did nothing at all. He did not pick up the phone and call his assistant. He did not open his laptop and forward the message to his lawyer. He did not begin, immediately, the quiet campaign of phone calls and nudges and implied favors that had been his instinctive response to every complication in his life since 1988. He just sat there. And after a long while, he got up, walked into his kitchen, poured himself a glass of water from the tap, and drank it standing over the sink like a man who had not eaten properly in 2 days. Which he hadn't. At the same moment, 200 miles away, in a small kitchen with crayon drawings taped crooked to the refrigerator door, Avery was on the phone with her grandmother, and her grandmother was saying in the voice of a woman who had been waiting 50 years for this exact kind of call, "Honey, you tell me the name of the boy, you tell me the name of the shop, And you give me until 4 o'clock. Grandma? 4 o'clock, Avery. His name is Miles Carter, Carter's Auto and Body on Route 9, and the other man is Dale Ruskin. Ruskin. A long pause. Dale Ruskin's father owed my second husband money in 1974, and he never paid it back. I have been waiting to use that. Grandma. Let me use it, Avery. Please use it. She hung up. Miles was watching her from across the table, a look on his face that she didn't quite know how to read, somewhere between gratitude and something smaller and more embarrassed. Your grandmother, he said. My grandmother. What did Dale's dad do to her husband in 1974? I don't actually know. I'm a little afraid to ask. Okay. Chloe, still sitting between them, was now using the coffee spoon to conduct an invisible orchestra. She'd lost interest in the adult conversation the way 6-year-olds lose interest in everything that doesn't involve them directly. Miles reached over and smoothed her hair without looking at her, the gesture automatic, worn in, and Avery watched him do it and felt something shift very quietly in her chest. The phone on the table buzzed. Miles picked it up. Dennis. Miles, you need to come see this. Right now? Right now. I see it. Dennis's kitchen looked like a garage sale that had learned to read. Stacks of computer parts on every surface, a soldering iron still warm on a metal tray, 3 monitors going at once. And Dennis himself, a heavy-set man of 50 with a graying beard and glasses repaired at the bridge, with a piece of solder, sitting in his rolling chair with a plate of Triscuits balanced on his knee. Sit down, Dennis said. Miles sat. Avery stood behind him, arms crossed. 30 days of footage, Dennis said. Camera only catches the area by the front counter, but that's plenty. Watch. He tapped a key. The middle monitor lit up with grainy black and white video of Miles's shop, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. They watched for a second. Nothing. Miles at the counter ringing up a customer. Keep watching, Dennis said. He scrubbed forward. Timestamps flicked past. The shop, empty at night. The shop, open in the morning. Miles moving around. Jared moving around. Jared on a weekend, alone, leaning over the counter and photographing the pages of the appointment book with his cell phone. Miles went very still. Keep watching, Dennis said. More footage. Another day. Jared again, in the office this time, the camera just barely catching the reflection of him through the open doorway. He was at Miles's computer. Then, another day. Jared with a USB drive, plugging it in, waiting, unplugging it, putting it back in his pocket. 2 different Saturdays, Dennis said. Both times he was supposed to be closing up. Both times you were out. And if you think that's the good part, I've got more. This is from a week ago. He's not even supposed to work here anymore, right? He quit 6 weeks ago. Yeah. Dennis tapped a key. New footage. Timestamp 9 days ago. The shop, after hours. Dark. The front door opening. A man entering. He was wearing a hoodie, but when he turned toward the counter, the camera caught his face clean. Jared, with his own key. You gave him a key? Avery said. Yeah, 3 months ago when I hired him. Miles pressed a hand to his forehead. I never got it back when he quit. I didn't even think about it. I changed the alarm code, but not the lock. He's not setting off the alarm, Dennis said, because he knows the old code and you never rearmed. Watch. On screen, Jared walked calmly around the counter, opened the filing cabinet, and photographed documents. Then he pulled 3 blank invoice sheets from the top of the stack, pre-printed, Miles's logo on them, and folded them into his hoodie pocket, and walked out. Miles sat back. Those are my invoices. Yeah, those are my invoices. He took blank ones, with my letterhead, to file fake complaints with, Avery said quietly, so that when the state pulls the paperwork, the complainants can show invoices that look like they came from your shop. Dennis pointed at her. She got it. Miles stared at the screen. The anger in him was not hot. It was cold. It was the kind of anger that did not get you in trouble because it did not make you say anything. It just sat inside you like a second spine. Dennis, he said, how much of this can you give me on a flash drive by tonight? All of it. All of it. Give me 90 minutes. Thank you, Dennis. You're welcome. Dennis looked at Avery. Nice to meet you, by the way. I'm Dennis. Avery? You the one who stayed? I'm the one who stayed. Good. Miles needs somebody who stays. Miles stood up. Dennis? I call him how I see him. Fine. They drove back to Miles's house in silence. He parked the truck. He sat with his hands on the wheel for a minute before he got out. Miles. I'm okay. Miles. I'm okay, Avery. I hired that kid. I trusted him. He sat at my kitchen table one time for Thanksgiving because he said his mom was working a double, and Miles. I told him a story about my dad while I passed him the potatoes. She didn't say anything, she just put her hand on the back of his neck, and she left it there, and he closed his eyes for a second. I know what I have to do, he said finally. Okay. I don't want to do it, but I know I have to do it. What? I have to call Jared. Miles, no. You call the police. You don't... I'm going to call the police, but first, I'm going to call Jared. Because whatever Dale offered him, I want to look him in the eye and tell him I know. And I want him to know I know before the police do. Because he's 19, Avery. He's a stupid kid who got bought. And if I call the cops first, he goes away for 3 years and his mom ends up with nothing and his life is over. If I call him first, maybe, he flips. He testifies. He gives up Dale. And he doesn't spend the next 3 years of his life becoming the thing the system will make him into. Avery looked at him for a long time. Miles Carter, she said. What? You're a better man than my entire family combined. Avery, I'm not making a joke. I know. She shook her head. Call him. Jared Kuhn picked up on the fourth ring. His voice was young and flat and not yet awake, even though it was after 3 in the afternoon because 19-year-olds slept like they were storing it for winter. Miles? Hey, Jared? A long pause. Hey, Mr. Carter. You got a minute? Yeah. Where are you? At home. Can I come by? An even longer pause. Mr. Carter, Jared, I've got video of you in my shop 9 nights ago at 10:47 p.m. with a key I forgot to ask for and a USB drive in your pocket, taking pictures of my invoice book. I've got 3 fake complaints filed against me at the state, and the names on 2 of them are names from my customer list. I know what's going on. I'm not calling the cops yet. I'm calling you first. I'm 32 years old, and I'm not mad at you. I'm asking you, as a man who has been a 19-year-old idiot once in his life, to let me come over and talk to you before this gets bigger than you can get out of. The pause this time was very, very long. When Jared finally spoke, his voice had changed. It was smaller. My mom's not home. I'll come alone. Mr. Carter. Yeah. I didn't want to do it. I know. He gave me $5,000. Jared. My mom's insurance didn't cover her surgery and Jared, I'm coming over. Don't do anything. Don't call anybody. Don't leave. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Okay? Okay. He hung up. He looked at Avery. She had been listening to one side of the conversation, and her face was very still. Stay here with Chloe, he said. Miles, please, I need to do this one alone. Okay. He kissed her. It was the first time. He didn't plan it. He leaned across the truck cab and he kissed her, once, on the mouth, quick and warm, not a moment, not a scene, just a thing a man does when he's about to go do something hard, and he wants to leave the person he loves with something to hold. Then he got out of the truck. She watched him drive away. She sat in his driveway for a minute with her hand pressed against her mouth. Then she went inside and Chloe looked up from where she was coloring on the living room floor and said, Did Daddy go to fix a car? Kind of, sweetheart. Is he coming back? Yeah, he's coming back. Jared Kuhn lived in a duplex on the east side of town with his mother, who was a certified nursing assistant at the regional hospital, and a 12-year-old sister named Rachel, who answered the door when Miles knocked, because Jared had, apparently, not moved from the couch since the phone call. He's in the living room, Rachel said. Thanks, Rachel. Are you going to yell at him? No. Good, because he's been crying. Okay. She let him in. Jared was on the couch. He had not, by the look of him, slept in some time. His eyes were red. He had a gaming controller in his hand, which he was not using, and his knuckles were white around it. "Mr. Carter!" "Jared." Miles sat down in the armchair across from him. He didn't take off his jacket. He rested his elbows on his knees. "Tell me how it started." Jared stared at the carpet. "He came to the shop where I was working, the new place. He said he knew me from community college, even though he didn't. He bought me a coffee. He asked me about my mom. He said he heard she was sick. I don't know how he heard." "Small town." "Yeah." "Keep going." "He said he could help. He said he'd give me $5,000 cash if I could just get some information for him. Customer list. Some blank invoices, that's all," he said. "Just so he could see how your shop operated. He said it was normal business research." "And you believed him?" Jared looked up. "Mr. Carter? No, I didn't believe him. I knew. But my mom was sleeping on the couch because she couldn't make it up the stairs, and the hospital was calling about the bill every day, and I knew, and I did it anyway." Miles nodded slowly. "What else did you give him?" "Customer list, copies of the last 6 months of invoices, 3 blank invoice sheets. He took photos of your appointment book on his phone. I took photos. For him." "And the complaints?" "I didn't file those, Mr. Carter, I swear. I didn't even know he was going to file those. I thought he just wanted— I don't know what I thought. I thought he wanted to undercut your prices. I didn't know he was going to— "Jared, look at me." Jared looked. "I'm going to the police tomorrow morning after my inspection. I'm bringing video evidence, my customer list, my invoice records, and the copies of the fake complaints. I'm going to give them everything." "Mr. Carter, I'm not done. Tomorrow afternoon, if you agree, you are going to walk into the police station with me. You're going to give a statement. You're going to tell them what you told me. You're going to name Dale Ruskin. You're going to turn over whatever text messages or emails or bank transfers you have from him. Do you understand me?" "Mr. Carter, I'll go to jail." "If you do this, Jared, you won't. The DA is going to want Dale 100 times more than he wants you. You are 19 years old with no record, whose mother is sick, who was manipulated by a man twice his age, who used your mother's illness against you. You are going to walk out of that station with a suspended sentence and probation and a bill for restitution that you and I will figure out how to pay, because you are going to come back to work at my shop and work it off." Jared blinked. "Mr. Carter, what? You want me back at the shop?" "Jared, you made a mistake. A big one. You didn't murder anybody. You got leaned on by a rich son of a bitch who knew exactly which button to push. If I fired every man in my life who did a dumb thing when he was 19 and his family was struggling, I wouldn't have a father or 2 uncles or a guy at the parts store who I play poker with. You're going to make this right. You're going to work for me at a fair wage. You're going to pay back what you took. And you're going to get your mother the help she needs. Are we clear?" "Tit!" Jared put his face in his hands. "Yes, sir." "All right. Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry. I know. I'm so sorry." "Jared, I know." Miles stood up. His knees popped. He felt every one of the 32 years he'd put on them. "Get some sleep, kid. 9 a.m. Monday. My shop. You're going to stand next to me during the state inspection. Then we're going to the police station together. Bring everything you've got from Dale. Texts, emails, receipts, all of it." "Yes, sir." Miles walked to the door. Rachel was standing in the hallway holding a juice box, pretending she had not been listening. "Take care of your brother, Rachel." "Okay." "And your mom." "Okay." He drove home in silence. Avery was on the couch with Chloe asleep in her lap when he walked in. She looked up. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. He sat down on the coffee table in front of her. He put his forehead against her knee. She ran her hand through his hair. "How was it?" she said. "He's 19. "I know." "He's a kid." "I know, Miles." "His mom's sick." "Okay." "I told him to come to the shop Monday." "Okay." "I think we're going to win." "I know we are." He lifted his head. He looked at her. He looked at his daughter asleep in her arms, Mr. Whiskers smashed between them, Chloe's mouth open, one sock missing. "Avery?" "Yeah." "I'm in love with you." She didn't answer for a second. Then she smiled. It was small and real and crooked. the smile she'd given him in the rain. I know, Miles. You know. I've known since the flowers. The flowers? You brought an oil can out for a vase. You didn't say a word about it. You just filled it with water and handed it to me. He laughed, short and tired. That's when you knew. That's when I knew. Okay. Okay. He leaned up and kissed her. Slow this time. Careful. Chloe slept through it because 6-year-olds were the deepest sleepers in the world, and the whole house was quiet except for the tick of the radiator and the soft sound of the leaves still coming down in the neighbor's yard. Outside, the streetlight came on. Miles's phone, on the kitchen counter, buzzed once. A text from Avery's grandmother. The paper runs the story tomorrow. 8 a.m. edition. They want a quote from Miles by 6 a.m. Also, I called in the favor about Ruskin Sr. Tell the boy not to worry. Ethel. Miles read it. He showed it to Avery. Avery read it. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Miles was up at 4:30. He had not really slept, but he had done the thing that passes for sleep when you are a man with a problem and a morning coming for you. He had closed his eyes in the dark and let his mind run through the inspection a dozen times, and somewhere around 3 he had lost consciousness for maybe an hour. And when he opened his eyes again, it was already almost time. The kitchen was dark. The coffee pot was already gurgling. Avery must have said it the night before. She had stayed in the guest room. She had offered, once, with a raised eyebrow and a small, tired smile, to sleep on the couch. And he had said no, the guest room, because Chloe was in the house. And Avery had nodded and kissed his forehead and closed the door without making a thing of it. He stood at the counter in his t-shirt and sweatpants and stared at the coffee and thought about what he was about to do, and for the first time in about 3 days, he was not afraid. He was something else. He was not sure what to call it. He was, maybe, for the first time in 5 years, a man who was about to go swing at something that was swinging at him, instead of a man who was trying to keep his head down and hope the punch missed. Avery came out at 5, already dressed, her hair still wet from the shower. She was wearing jeans and a plain cream sweater and no makeup, which he realized, looking at her, he had almost never seen. She looked younger without it. She also looked tougher. You ready? She said. I'm ready. The paper called. Eileen at the Ashford Sentinel. They want you to come by at 6:15 for the quote. I told them you'd be there. Okay. I'm going with you. Okay? She handed him a mug. He took it. Miles. Yeah. Whatever happens today, I just want to say it out loud so it's said you're a good man. Not a perfect one. A good one. And I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her for a second. Then he put the mug down on the counter and he pulled her into his chest and he held her there for maybe 30 seconds without saying anything because his throat had closed up and he didn't trust it. When he let her go, she was wiping her cheek on the shoulder of his t-shirt and pretending she wasn't. Let's go win, she said. Yeah, Eileen at the Sentinel was 68 years old, smoked unfiltered Camels in the alley behind the office on her breaks, and had written 3 books nobody had bought. She had also, according to Avery's grandmother, been the first female City Hall reporter in the county's history, and had once made a mayor cry in print. She looked exactly like a woman who would do that, and when Miles walked into the cramped newsroom at 6:17, she stood up from her desk and jabbed a pencil at him. You Carter? Yes, ma'am. Sit down. You've got 40 minutes until this goes to press. Don't waste them. He sat. Avery sat next to him. Eileen pulled up a digital recorder and set it on the desk between them. Here's what I've got from Ruskin's camp, she said. Somebody, I'm not saying who, but somebody, leaked me 3 complaints filed with the state against your shop over the last week. Overcharging, counterfeit parts, failure to deliver. The source wants me to run the story today, front page, with a follow-up quote from Ruskin about how he's concerned for the community. That's the story I'm supposed to be writing. You with me? I'm with you. So tell me what you've got, Miles told her. He told her about Jared. He told her about the camera footage. He told her about the names on the complaints that were not names of his actual customers. He told her about Mrs. Patterson, who did not own a Buick. He told her he had a state inspection at 9, and that Jared would be present, and that after the inspection, both of them were walking into the police station. He did not mention Avery's family, and he did not mention the phone call her grandmother had made. Eileen listened. She made notes. When he was done, she leaned back in her chair and chewed on the eraser of her pencil. Mr. Carter. Yes, ma'am. You know I could just print Ruskin's version and be done by lunch. I know. Why should I do the harder thing? Miles looked at her for a long moment. Because you used to be the only woman on this beat, he said, and you didn't get there by printing the easy version. Eileen stared at him. Then she laughed, one short, dry laugh, and pointed her pencil at Avery. This one, she said, is Trouble. I can see it. Ethel's granddaughter, right? Yes, ma'am. Your grandmother was Trouble, too, in a good way. Eileen turned back to Miles. You give me the video footage by 7:30. I'll hold the complaint story until after your inspection. If you come out clean, I run both stories side by side with your quote on top. If you don't come out clean, I run the complaint story and I don't mention you called me first. Fair. I don't do favors, Mr. Carter. I don't want favors, ma'am. Good. She stood up. The meeting was over. He stood up. He shook her hand. It was small and dry and cold and surprisingly strong. Go win your inspection, kid. Yes, ma'am. The state inspector was a woman named Karen Whitfield, and she arrived at 8:57 in a gray Honda Civic with government plates, carrying a clipboard and a laptop bag. She was in her late 40s, wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and had the specific kind of tired that only comes from a career spent listening to men explain things she already knew. Miles met her at the door. He had put on his cleanest shop shirt. Avery was inside, sitting in the office with Mrs. Patterson, who had arrived at 8:40 in a lavender cardigan and a mood. Jared was in the bay, in a fresh shirt, with a manila folder in his hands that he had not stopped holding since he'd walked in 20 minutes earlier. Mr. Carter. Ms. Whitfield. You know why I'm here. I do. You ready for this? I'm ready. Good. Then let's not waste each other's time. She walked in. She looked around the shop. She clicked her pen. She began. Miles did not try to charm her. He had decided, at 4 a.m, that the worst thing he could do was charm her. He answered her questions flatly and briefly and completely. He pulled every invoice she asked for. He pulled the logbook. He pulled the customer database. He pulled his tax filings, 3 years back, which he had organized in a banker's box the night before. He showed her the camera, the hard drive, the cleaned-up footage of Jared entering the shop after hours with a key and a USB drive. At about 9:30, he said, very quietly, Ms. Whitfield, I'd like to introduce you to someone before we go any further. Who? Priscilla Patterson. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the office like a small, lavender, extremely dangerous cloud. Ms. Whitfield, my name is Priscilla Patterson, and I live at 412 Elm Street in this town. I have lived here since 1961. I have driven a 1986 Lincoln Town Car for 22 years. I have never in my life owned a Buick. I bring you this, and she produced from her handbag the original handwritten invoice Miles had given her the week before, for the actual and entirely honest work Mr. Carter performed on my actual and entirely real car. I was told there is a complaint filed against him under my name with an invoice for Buick repair work, for a price that Mr. Carter would never in 1,000 years charge any customer, let alone an 81-year-old widow. I am here to tell you, Ms. Whitfield, that if you or your department have been used as a weapon in some kind of dirty little scheme by a person I will not dignify by naming, I will personally call every member of my women's auxiliary, and we will write letters to every state representative in this district until my pen runs dry. Do we understand each other? Karen Whitfield looked at her for a long moment. Then Karen Whitfield, who had spent 18 years in state compliance work and had heard every kind of speech a citizen could make, did something she almost never did. She smiled. Mrs. Patterson. Yes. I think we understand each other perfectly. Oh. At 10:42, Miss Whitfield closed her laptop. She put her pen in her breast pocket. She stood up. Mr. Carter. Yes, ma'am. I'll be filing my report this afternoon. My finding will be that the complaints were fraudulent and that no further action is warranted. Your insurance carrier will be notified accordingly. Miles let out a breath he had not known he was holding for 3 days. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm also required to refer evidence of criminal activity to the appropriate authorities, which means I'll be sending everything you gave me over to the state AG's office along with the local police. Do you have a problem with that? No, ma'am. Your former employee. Yes, ma'am. He's here with you. Yes, ma'am. He's coming with you to the police station after this? Yes, ma'am. Karen Whitfield looked at Jared. Jared, white as a sheet, nodded. Young man. Yes, ma'am. You did the right thing exactly one time, today. Do it again tomorrow, and the day after. Yes, ma'am. She nodded once, curtly, and walked out. Miles stood in the middle of his own shop for about 10 seconds. Then Avery was against him, her arms around his ribs, her face against his chest, and Mrs. Patterson was patting Jared on the shoulder in a way that was either comforting or threatening, Jared himself clearly unsure which. And somewhere outside, a car horn honked, and the morning sun had finally burned through the overcast and was coming in through the bay door at a low angle that made everything gold. Miles looked down at the top of Avery's head. We won, he said. No, Miles, you won. Avery, I'm just telling you what's true. He kissed the top of her head. Then we won, he said again. She didn't argue with him that time. The police station visit took 4 hours. Jared gave a full statement. He turned over every text message, every bank deposit, every photograph of Dale Ruskin in the diner on Maple, where they had met 3 times. The detective who took the statement was a man named Ray Alvarez, who had known Miles's father, and who, when Miles walked in, simply said, Carter, what do we got? By 2:30, Dale Ruskin was being interviewed in a room down the hall, having been picked up at his shop an hour earlier. By 4, the district attorney's office had opened a formal case. By the time Miles walked Jared back to his mother's duplex that evening, with the agreement that Jared would report to Carter's auto at 7 a.m. the next morning to begin the long, slow process of paying back what he owed, the story was already changing shape in the town's mouth. The 8 a.m. edition of the Sentinel had hit the doorsteps that morning, with the complaint story above the fold. The evening online update carried the real story, with Miles's name cleared, the words fraudulent complaints in the headline, and a quote from Karen Whitfield herself about the integrity of Carter's auto and body. Eileen had buried Ruskin on page 3 in a follow-up, with the words under investigation in her headline and enough quiet, professional detail to ensure that by Wednesday, Ruskin Automotive would have lost 11 customers, 3 contracts with local fleet accounts, and by the following Friday, its financing for the expansion Dale had been bragging about at the Chamber of Commerce for the last year. Miles read the online update sitting on his couch at 7 p.m. that Monday, with Chloe asleep against his ribs and Avery curled up against his other side with her head on his shoulder. He closed the laptop. Hey, Avery said softly. Hey, you okay? Yeah. Really? Really, it's just... What? I've been scared of something for 5 years. Of what? He was quiet a moment. That if something hard came at me, I wouldn't be able to take it. That I'd used up whatever strength I had raising her, and if something else came, I was going to break. Miles. And today came, and it was hard, and I didn't break. She reached up and put her hand on his jaw. You were never going to break, Miles. You don't know that. I do know that. People who are actually going to break don't spend 5 years carrying a little girl on their shoulders one meatloaf at a time. They break early. You were just tired, honey. You weren't breaking. He didn't answer. After a minute, he said very quietly, Nobody's called me honey in a long time. Get used to it. He laughed, short and tired. Okay, Pete. The next week was the strangest one of his life. Not because anything was hard, but because nothing was, suddenly. The shop filled up. Monday afternoon, 2 customers he had not seen in a year called to ask for appointments, and by Wednesday morning he had a waiting list. On Thursday, a woman he didn't know walked in with a fruit basket and said, My mother reads the Sentinel. She says you're the kind of mechanic we should be supporting. She didn't even need any work done on her car. She just wanted to drop off fruit. Mrs. Patterson made 2 pies that week. She brought both of them personally. Jared showed up at 7 a.m. every morning that week in the same faded black hoodie and the same quiet, careful silence. And he swept the shop and organized the parts room and did every single thing Miles asked him to do and a couple of things Miles hadn't asked. On Wednesday, when he paused with a broom in his hand and said, Mr. Carter, I don't know how to say thank you, Miles just said, Don't say thank you. Say you'll pass it on someday. And Jared nodded and didn't say anything else and went back to sweeping. Dale Ruskin was indicted on a Friday. 3 counts of fraud, one count of witness tampering, one count of conspiracy. His attorney issued a statement about fighting the charges. By the end of that month, Ruskin Automotive would be sold in a hurried private transaction to a chain out of a larger city, and Dale himself would quietly move away and, as far as Miles would ever hear, not come back. And Robert Quinn, who had not called his daughter since the text message, sent her a text on Saturday morning that contained only 2 words. "I'm sorry." Avery read it in Miles's kitchen, still in her borrowed sweatpants and one of his oversized flannels. She stared at it for a long time. Then she wrote back, "Come to town, meet him properly. Meet his daughter. No lawyers." She hit send and set the phone face down on the counter. Her hand was shaking. Miles was watching her from across the kitchen, and he crossed the room and put his hand on the small of her back. "You okay?" "I don't know." "What'd you tell him?" "To come. To meet you. Properly." "Oh. Is that okay?" "That's okay. Miles, he's not going to be easy." Avery. "Yeah. He's already not easy. I already met him. I already threw his card in the trash. We've done the hard part." "You have no idea what the hard part is." Avery. "Yeah. If he walks in and says something to you I don't like, I'm putting him back in the car. I don't care what his last name is. You're not going to sit at my kitchen table and get talked down to by anybody. Not even your own father." She looked at him for a second. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay?" She set her phone down. "For the record," she said, "if you had said anything else, I would have had to rethink this whole thing. Chut." Robert Quinn arrived the following Saturday at 11 a.m. in the same black Mercedes with the same driver. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and gray slacks and looked somehow 10 years older than he had 3 weeks earlier in Miles's shop. He rang the bell. Miles opened the door. "Mr. Quinn." "Mr. Carter?" There was a long pause. "You want to come in?" "Yes." Miles stepped aside. Robert Quinn walked into the small entryway of a 2-bedroom rental house on the east side of a small town, and he looked around, and he took it in, and his face did something complicated that was very hard to read. Chloe came out of the kitchen first, before Avery did. She had been coloring at the kitchen table, and she had a blue marker in her hand, and she stopped in the middle of the hallway and stared at the tall, silver-haired man in the sweater. "Hi," she said. "Hello. Are you Avery's daddy?" "I am." Chloe considered this. "Avery's nice." "Yes," Robert said. "She is." "Do you like pancakes?" Yes, I like pancakes. My dad makes them shaped like letters." Robert Quinn looked at Miles over his daughter's head. "Does he?" "He does. The E is hard. I always get the E." Avery came out of the kitchen then. She had not put on makeup. She had not dressed up. She was wearing Miles's flannel shirt, and her hair was in a low ponytail, and she looked, Miles thought, absolutely nothing like the woman who had stood in the rain that first night in a silk blouse and a $75,000 car. She looked better. "Dad?" "Avery." "Come sit down." They sat at the kitchen table. Miles made coffee. Chloe climbed into Avery's lap without asking, because that, apparently, was where Chloe sat now, and Robert Quinn watched his daughter put her arms around a little girl she had known for less than a month, and he watched the little girl relax into her the way a cat relaxes when it's safe. And something in his face shifted, fractionally, the way it had shifted in Miles's shop 3 weeks ago. "Mr. Carter," Robert said. "Yes, I owe you an apology." "All right. I was wrong about you, about what was happening here. I came to your shop that day because I believed I was protecting my daughter from a kind of heartbreak I had seen her experience before with men who did not have your character. I was wrong. I am sorry. I should have let her make her own decision." Miles nodded slowly. "Mr. Quinn, I appreciate that. I do. But I'm not the one you owe the apology to." Robert looked at his daughter. "Avery." "Yeah, Dad. I'm sorry." "Dad. I'm sorry, honey." She was quiet for a second. Then she nodded once, and she reached across the table, and she put her hand on top of her father's hand. It was, Miles thought, probably the first time she had done that in a long time. "It's okay, Dad." "It isn't, but thank you." There was a long silence. Then Chloe, in Avery's lap, said very seriously, "Mr. Quinn, Yes, sweetheart. Do you want to see my rabbit? Robert Quinn looked at a 6-year-old stranger holding a stuffed toy, and he looked at Miles, and he looked at his daughter, and after a moment, in a voice that did not entirely belong to the man who had put a business card on Miles's workbench 3 weeks earlier, he said, "I would like that very much." Winter came. The shop stayed full. Avery moved her things out of the apartment in the city in 2 trips, one for clothes, one for everything else, and she did not buy a big house. She did not try to make Miles move out of his rental. She rented a small 1-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from the shop and used it as a home base for the 3 days a week she still had to work in the city, and the other 4 days she spent at Miles's house, at Miles's kitchen table, at Miles's shop, bringing sandwiches. She did not quit her job. She did not offer to pay off his mortgage. She did not try to rescue him in any of the ways her father would have expected her to rescue him. She just stayed, and she showed up, and she learned the names of his regulars, and she started handling the shop's paperwork on weekends because she was better at it than he was. And she made him keep her on the books at $12 an hour because she said she refused to work for free like some kind of girlfriend charity. She taught Chloe how to braid her own hair in February, and when Chloe lost her second front tooth at the end of that same month, Avery was the one who was there because Miles was under a transmission and couldn't get out. By March, Chloe had stopped calling her Avery. The first time it happened, nobody made a big deal of it. It was a Tuesday night. They were at the kitchen table. Chloe wanted the salt. Chloe said, "Mom, can you pass the salt?" Avery's hand didn't even hesitate. She passed the salt. Then about 3 seconds later, her eyes went wide, and Miles's eyes went wide, and they both looked at Chloe. And Chloe, who had been in the middle of salting her macaroni, froze with the shaker in her hand and said, "What?" Nobody said anything for a second. Then Avery, very quietly, said, "Is that, sweetheart, is that okay that you called me that?" Chloe looked at her. "I forgot I wasn't supposed to." "You weren't. Nobody said you weren't." "I was waiting," Chloe said. "Waiting for what?" "Waiting to see if it was okay." Miles, under the table, reached over and took Avery's hand. He squeezed it so hard he was afraid for a second he was hurting her. "It's okay, baby," Avery said. Her voice was a little wet. "It's more than okay." "Okay. Okay." Chloe went back to salting her macaroni. Miles Carter, who had not cried since his father's funeral in 2002, put a hand over his eyes at his own kitchen table and sat very still for about 15 seconds. And Avery did not say a word, did not try to make it a moment, just held his other hand under the table while his daughter talked about her spelling test. He proposed in May, on a Saturday afternoon, without a ring, because he didn't have one yet. He did it in the shop, because the shop was where they had started, and he did it while he was under the hood of a 2011 Camry, because he was nervous and he couldn't look at her and ask at the same time. "Avery?" "Yeah." "Marry me." A long pause. "Miles Carter." "I know." "Did you just propose to me with a transmission fluid stain on your shirt?" "Yeah." "Under the hood of somebody else's Camry?" "Yeah." "Without a ring?" "I don't have one yet. I'm getting one. I couldn't wait another day." Another long pause. Then he felt her hands on his sides. She was tugging him out from under the hood. He came out. She was standing there with her arms crossed, in the cream sweater, and she was not crying because Avery didn't cry easily, but her mouth was doing the small, complicated thing it did when she was trying not to. "Yes," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, obviously." He kissed her. Jared, over in Bay 2, let out a loud whoop and then pretended 2 seconds later that he hadn't. Mr. Alvarez, the detective, who had stopped by that morning to drop off an update on Dale's case, stood up from where he'd been leaning on the counter and said, "Well, it's about damn time." Chloe, at the office desk, coloring, looked up and said, "Is this the grown-up talk part?" "No, baby," Miles said, without taking his eyes off Avery. "This is the good part." Blah. They got married in October, almost a year to the day after a cherry-red BMW had died on the side of Route 9 in a rainstorm. It wasn't a big wedding, it was in Louise's backyard. There were 32 people, and one of them was Mrs. Patterson, and one of them was Robert Quinn, and one of them was Avery's grandmother Ethel, who when she met Louise took Louise by both hands and said, "We should have been friends 40 years ago." and the two of them sat together in the same lawn chairs all afternoon and did not get up even once. Chloe wore a yellow dress because she had picked it out herself, and she carried Mr. Whiskers down the aisle because she had refused to consider any alternative. Jared drove his mother to the wedding and stayed to help clean up afterward. And he had, by then, been working at the shop for 11 months and was enrolled in a night program at the community college to get his associates in business, and he had paid back every dollar he had owed. Miles stood under a tree in his mother's backyard in a navy blue suit Avery had bought him and a tie Chloe had picked out, and he watched Avery walk toward him on her father's arm, and he thought about the boy he had been at 19 and the man he had been at 27 when Sarah had left, and the man he had been at 32 standing in the rain next to a broken BMW, and he thought about how wrong he had been all of those years, about what he had to carry and why. He had spent so long believing that loving somebody meant keeping them out of the ugly parts of your life. He had spent so long believing that strength was a room you stood in alone. He had spent so long believing that what a daughter needed, more than anything, was a father who had the whole thing figured out by himself. He had been wrong about all of it. What his daughter had needed was the same thing he had needed. Not a hero, not a man with all the answers, just a man who was willing to sit at the kitchen table with the people who loved him and say, out loud, the words he was afraid of. I'm tired. I'm scared. I don't know how this ends. That was the part no one had taught him. That love is not a rescue operation, and it is not a performance, and it is not the reward you get at the end of finally having everything together. Love is a woman who rents a car and stays through the weekend. Love is a 68-year-old reporter who agrees to hold a story. Love is a mother who pours you coffee at a kitchen table and tells you your father almost made the same mistake. Love is a 19-year-old with a stolen USB drive who gets offered a second chance by the man he tried to ruin. Love is a 6-year-old who waits quietly, patiently, for months to see if she is allowed to say the word that was in her mouth all along. Love is not perfect. None of the people standing in that backyard were perfect. Avery was stubborn and proud, and sometimes spent money in ways Miles didn't understand. Miles was guarded and too quiet and sometimes worked 12 hours when he should have worked 8. Robert Quinn would always, a little, be the man who had offered a bribe on a workbench. Louise would always, a little, be a woman who had learned to worry before she had learned to trust. Jared would always, a little, be a kid who had done the wrong thing for a reason that was almost understandable. That was the whole point. That was the only point. The people you build a life with are not people who never fail you. They are people who fail you and then stay. They are people who watch you fail and stay. They are people who look at the worst thing you have ever done or the worst thing that has ever been done to you and do not flinch and do not leave and do not make you earn forgiveness with a speech. They just stay. Avery reached him at the end of the aisle. She had tears in her eyes. Her father was crying, which Miles had not thought was possible. Ethel was holding Louise's hand. Chloe was clutching Mr. Whiskers like a bouquet and looking up at the two adults like she was personally responsible for the entire arrangement, which she kind of was. "Hi," Avery whispered. "Hi. You ready?" "I've been ready." "Okay. Okay." He took her hand and he held it, and he did not let go for a very long time. Chloe tugged on Avery's dress. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. Can I hold the rings part?" "Yes, sweetheart. You can hold the rings part." Chloe took the rings. Chloe turned gravely to the 32 people sitting on folding chairs in a small backyard in a small town on a cold, bright October afternoon. And Chloe, age 6, with one sock slightly higher than the other and Mr. Whiskers under one arm, lifted up her other hand and said, in the clearest voice her father had ever heard from her, "We're ready now." And Miles Carter, a 33-year-old auto mechanic who had spent 5 years believing that the best he could ever hope for was to not get hit by anything else, put his hand over his daughter's and his fiancée's at the same time, and he did not think about the past, for once. He just stood there, in his mother's backyard, in the last golden light of an October afternoon, and he let himself be exactly where he was, which was home, which, it turned out, was not a place he had built alone, which was the whole lesson in the end, the one he'd been refusing to learn for 5 years, the one a woman had knocked on his door in a rainstorm to teach him, that a man who tries to carry everything by himself will eventually drop the one thing that matters. That pride, dressed up as responsibility, is still just pride. That the word alone sounds strong when you say it out loud, but it sounds very small in a house with no one in it. He had almost missed it. He had almost sent her home. He had almost let a man in a charcoal suit write the ending of his life for him, and he had almost let his own fear do the same thing. But he hadn't. He had opened the door. He had let her in. He had told his mother at a kitchen table, out loud, that he was scared. He had given a 19-year-old kid a second chance instead of a prison sentence. He had stood, eventually, at the end of an aisle in his mother's backyard and held the hand of the woman who had turned around at exit 22 and come back to him, and he had stopped being afraid of the good thing. That, he understood now, was the only brave thing a man could ever really do. Not refuse the help. Not shoulder the weight. Not protect the people he loved from his own life, but let them in. All the way in, where the hard things were, where the fear lived, where the two-bedroom rental and the leaky roof and the daughter with her second missing tooth and the broken pieces of a man's self-respect were all just lying around on the floor. Let them in. And then stay. And let them stay. That was the whole story. That had always been the whole story. The mechanic and the heiress and the little girl who called her mom before anyone ever said the word out loud. 3 imperfect people. 1 real family, built not on perfection, but on the small, stubborn, unglamorous decision made over and over again every morning for the rest of their lives, to stay.